Welcome to insane HOA madness. She tried to ban me, so I documented everything. You can be mad or you can be compliant. Colleen Harper held a missing pool key tag and screamed that keys did not walk away by themselves. I stood on the walkway outside the Redstone Meadows clubhouse in Portland, Oregon, watching her wave that single key tag like it was a murder weapon. My name is on the HOA ledger as a building inspector who lives in Unit 14, and right now Colleen was telling me I had stolen a stack of HOA supply gift cards from the Mailbox cluster. I work in commercial inspections, so I know what real evidence looks like. This was not it. Colleen is the neighborhood communications lead, which means she runs the resident portal and sends the weekly violation roundup emails. She also jingles a key ring with too many keys every time she wants you to know she is in charge. She jabbed a finger at me. I am documenting everything. Someone posted a blurry clip and she insisted it was me without letting anyone zoom. The clip showed a figure in a jacket near the Mailbox cluster at night, reaching into an open panel. Colleen had screenshotted it from the portal and printed it on regular paper. The timestamp bar was unreadable. The face was a blur. She held the page up like a warrant. I said, "That could be anyone." She said, "Your timeline is irrelevant." I felt my jaw tighten. The HOA was threatening to revoke my guest parking and visitor access at midnight tonight if I did not confess. My girlfriend was supposed to visit this weekend. Colleen had already sent an email to management saying I was running a side business from my home to make the theft narrative stick. That was a lie. I do not run anything from home except my coffee maker. Colleen shook the key tag again. This was in the lock. You were the last one with access. I said, "I picked up my mail yesterday." So did 20 other people. She ignored me and pulled out a clipboard in a clear sleeve like it was evidence. Inside was a blank HOA complaint form. She said, "I have messages proving it," and she waved her phone around without showing the screen. A neighbor walked past and slowed down. Colleen raised her voice. "We have a thief in the community." The neighbor looked at me, then kept walking. My stomach dropped. This was not just about the cards. This was about my reputation. If Colleen convinced enough people, I would be the guy everyone avoided at the mailroom. I said, "Show me the footage." She said, "The footage is being reviewed." I said, "By who?" She said, "By me." That was when I knew I was in trouble. Colleen controlled the portal uploads and the security camera access. If she wanted to bury something, she could. I went home and checked my doorbell camera. I have a Ring unit that covers my porch and part of the walkway. I scrolled back to the night in question. At 10:15, I was on my couch watching a game. At 10:20, someone in a tan rain jacket walked past my unit toward the Mailbox cluster. The figure had a hood up. I could not see the face, but I could see the key ring. It was huge. Too many keys. Colleen carries a key ring like that. I screenshotted the frame and saved it to my laptop. Then I checked the HOA portal. The blurry clip Colleen had shown me was gone. I searched the incident reports. Nothing. I searched the message board. Nothing. Colleen had deleted it or buried it and insisted it never existed. That was escalation step 2. Step 1 had been yesterday, when she tried to confiscate a package from my porch as supposed evidence. She claimed it was an HOA supply order that had been misdelivered. I told her it was a work binder I had ordered on Amazon. She left, but she took a photo of my address label. I called my buddy Marcus, who works as a tow yard clerk. I told him what was happening. He said if she tries to tow you, the authorization has to come through the management office with a signed work order. If it does not, we do not hook it. That gave me a plan. I needed to get ahead of Colleen before she could stack more lies. The next morning, I went to the management office. It is a small storefront in a strip mall, 2 miles from the neighborhood. I walked in and asked to see the complaint log. The receptionist, a tired-looking woman named Diane, said, "We do not usually share that." I said, "I am the subject of a theft complaint, and I need to see what was filed." She hesitated, then pulled up the system. There were 3 complaints under my address, all filed by Colleen, all in the last 48 hours. One said I was operating a business. One said I had stolen mail. One said I had been seen tampering with the clubhouse locks. I said none of that is true. Diane said, you will need to submit a rebuttal in writing. I said, I will, but first I need to know who has access to the mailbox cluster master key. She looked uncomfortable. She said, that is restricted. I said, is Colleen Harper on the list? Diane did not answer, but her face told me yes. I left and drove to the tow yard. Marcus was on shift. I showed him the doorbell screenshot. He looked at the timestamp and said, that matches the night someone reported a vehicle blocking the fire lane near your building. The work order came through, but it got canceled an hour later. No vehicle was found. I said, who requested the tow? He pulled up the log and turned the screen toward me. Colleen Harper. That was the pattern. Colleen was using HOA systems to harass me and build a false case. I needed more proof. I went back to the neighborhood and parked near the mailbox cluster. It was mid-afternoon. A few people were picking up packages. I watched Colleen walk up with her clipboard and her key ring. She unlocked the master panel and pulled out a small stack of envelopes. Then she opened her own mailbox, took out a padded mailer, and walked back to her car. I took a photo with my phone. It was not proof of theft yet, but it was proof she had access. That night, I got an email from the HOA. It said my guest parking privileges were suspended effective immediately due to ongoing investigation. It was signed by Colleen. I called the management office and left a voicemail. No one called back. My girlfriend texted and said she was still coming this weekend. I told her to park on the street. The next day, Colleen showed up at my door. She had a portable printer in a shoulder bag and a tablet in her hand. She said, I need to inspect your storage closet. I said, you do not have authority to do that. She said, I do under Section 12 of the bylaws. She pulled up a PDF on the tablet and held it out. I did not take it. I said, I am not letting you in without a work order from management. She smiled and said, fine. Then she opened the printer bag, pulled out the unit, plugged it into a portable battery, and printed a notice on the spot. It said I was in violation of the inspection clause and subject to a $500 fine. She taped it to my door. I pulled the notice down and took a photo. Then I went back inside and called an attorney. I got a consult appointment for the next afternoon. The lawyer told me to document everything and request a formal records review. She said, if the HOA is targeting you without cause, you may have a harassment claim. I said, what about the theft accusation? She said, if they accuse you publicly without proof, that is defamation. Keep every email and every notice. I went back to the portal and downloaded every message Colleen had sent in the last 6 months. I noticed something. 2 months ago, there was a complaint about missing petty cash from the clubhouse. 1 month ago, a complaint about missing supplies from the storage closet. Both complaints were filed by Colleen. Both were closed without resolution. I printed the threads and put them in a binder. Then I checked the metadata on the portal complaint form Colleen had shown me. I right-clicked the image file she had uploaded and looked at the creation date. It was 3 days ago. The theft had supposedly happened 5 days ago. She had backdated the screenshot. That was proof of tampering. I saved the file and added it to the binder. The weekend came. My girlfriend arrived and parked on the street. We went for a walk around the neighborhood. When we got back, Colleen was standing by my girlfriend's car with a security guard. The guard was young, maybe 25, and he looked uncomfortable. Colleen was pointing at the car and saying something. We walked over. She turned and said, this vehicle is not registered. I said, she is a guest. Colleen said, guest parking is suspended for your unit. The guard said, ma'am, if she is on the street, it is public parking. Colleen glared at him. She said, I am filing a report. My girlfriend whispered, is she serious? I said, yes. Colleen pulled out her phone and took a photo of the license plate. Then she turned to me and said, I am documenting everything. The guard looked at me and shook his head slightly. He said, you are fine. Colleen walked away, jingling her keys. That night, I got another email. It said a formal hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday to review my violations. I was required to attend or face automatic penalties. The email was signed by Colleen. I replied and asked for a copy of the complaint documentation. No response. On Monday, I went back to the management office. Diane was there. I said, I need to file a formal rebuttal. She gave me a form. I filled it out and attached copies of my doorbell footage, the metadata screenshot, and the tow yard log. I said I also need the access log for the Mailbox cluster master key. She said that requires a board request. I said, Colleen Harper is on the communications committee, not the board. Can you check if she has key access? Diane looked at her screen and nodded slowly. She said she checked out a key 2 weeks ago. It was supposed to be returned after the newsletter mail out. It was not. I said, can I get that in writing? Diane printed a key log summary and handed it to me. No names, just key numbers and dates. But the pattern was clear. Key number 7 was checked out on the same day as the first missing supply complaint. It was still checked out. I added the log to my binder. That afternoon, I went to the police station and filed a report. The officer was a middle-aged man with gray hair. He took notes while I explained the situation. He said, so you think she is framing you for thefts she committed? I said, yes. He said, do you have proof? I showed him the binder. He flipped through the pages and said, this is mostly circumstantial, but if you can show she had access and motive, you might have something. File a civil complaint with the HOA and keep this report number. If she escalates, call us. He gave me the incident number on a card. I left and drove back to the neighborhood. As I pulled in, I saw Colleen standing in the clubhouse parking lot with another neighbor, a woman named Janet. They were both looking at a tablet. I parked and walked over. Colleen saw me and said loudly, we are discussing the theft. Janet looked uncomfortable. I said, what theft? Colleen said, the gift cards and the petty cash, and now the missing key. I said, you have the key. She laughed and said, prove it. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I had taken of her at the mailbox cluster. I held it up. She was in the frame, keyring visible, reaching into the master panel. I said, this was taken 3 days ago. You checked out that key 2 weeks ago and never returned it. Colleen's face went red. She said, that does not prove anything. Janet said quietly, Colleen, maybe we should let management handle this. Colleen turned on her. She said, whose side are you on? Janet stepped back and walked away. Colleen turned back to me. She said, you are not going to win this. I said, I do not need to win. I just need to show the truth. She pulled out her portable printer again, plugged it in, and printed another notice. This one said I was banned from the clubhouse pending the hearing. She handed it to me. I took it and added it to my binder. That night, I got a call from Marcus. He said, you need to get down here. Colleen just called and tried to authorize a tow on your car. I told her we need a signed work order from management. She said she would get one. I said she cannot do that without a violation. He said, I know, but she is trying. I said, thanks for the heads up. He said, if she shows up here, I will stall her. Just get your proof together. The next morning, I went to the HOA management office again. This time, the property manager was there. His name was Ed, and he looked like he had heard enough complaints to last a lifetime. I said, I need to talk about Colleen Harper. He sighed and said, get in line. I showed him the binder. He flipped through it slowly. He stopped on the metadata screenshot. He said, she backdated this? I said, yes. He said, that is tampering. He looked at the key log. He said, she was supposed to return this 2 weeks ago, I said, and she tried to tow my car last night without a work order. He closed the binder and said, I will handle this. I said, the hearing is in 2 days. He said, there will not be a hearing. I am pulling her access and opening an internal review. If you want to file a formal complaint, I will back it. I said, I want her removed from the communications role. He said, that is up to the board, but I will recommend it. I left feeling lighter, but I knew Colleen was not done. That afternoon, she showed up at my door again. This time, she had a deputy with her. He was young, with short brown hair, and he looked annoyed. Colleen said, I need you to open your storage closet. The deputy said, ma'am, I am here for a welfare check, not a search. Colleen said he is hiding stolen property. The deputy looked at me and said, sir, do you mind if I look around? I said, do you have a warrant? He said, no. I said, then no. Colleen started talking over me. She said, he is running a business from his unit. He is tampering with HOA records. He is threatening residents. The deputy held up a hand and said, ma'am, stop interrupting. He looked at me and said, "Do you have any stolen HOA property?" I said, "No." He said, "Do you have proof?" I handed him the binder. He opened it and skimmed the first few pages. Then he looked at Colleen and said, "Did you file a false report?" She said no. He said, "Because this looks like harassment." She said nothing. He handed me the binder and said, "If she contacts you again, call us." Then he walked away. Colleen tried to follow the deputy to his car. He got in and drove away. She stood in the parking lot, breathing hard. Then she turned and looked at me. She said, "I am documenting everything." I said, "So am I." She walked to her car, got in, and left. That night I got an email from Ed. It said Colleen's portal access had been suspended pending review. All complaints filed by her in the last 30 days were being reevaluated. My guest parking was reinstated. The hearing was canceled. I felt a small surge of relief, but I knew this was not over. Colleen still had the key. She still had whatever she had stolen, and she still had her reputation in the neighborhood. The next day I went to the clubhouse. The property manager had called a meeting with the board to review Colleen's role. I was not required to attend, but I wanted to be there. The meeting was in the main room, and about a dozen residents showed up. Colleen was already there, sitting in the front row with her clipboard and her key ring. She looked calm, but I could see her jaw was tight. Ed stood at the front and said, "We are here to discuss the communications committee and some recent concerns." Colleen stood up and said, "I have concerns too." She pointed at me. "He has been harassing me. He has been filing false complaints. He has been tampering with portal records." Ed said, "Sit down." She said, "I am the victim here." Ed said, "Sit down now, or I will ask you to leave." She sat. Ed opened a folder and pulled out the key log. He said, "Key number 7 was checked out on March 10th. It was due back on March 12th. It is still missing." Colleen said, "I returned it." Ed said, "The log says otherwise." Colleen said, "The log is wrong." Ed said, "Show me your key ring." She hesitated. Then she pulled it out. Ed counted the keys. He said, "You have 14 keys. What are they for?" She said various things. He said, "HOA keys are numbered. Show me number 7. She looked at the ring and said, "I do not have it." Ed said, "You just said you returned it." She said, "I meant I lost it." Ed turned to me. He said, "Do you have the photo?" I pulled out my phone and handed it to him. He held it up so the board could see. He said, "This shows Colleen at the mailbox cluster 3 days ago with the master key. She said she returned it 2 weeks ago." Colleen stood up and said, "That is fake." Ed said, "It has a timestamp and geotag." She said, "He edited it." One of the board members, an older man named Greg, said, "Colleen, just stop." Ed said, "We are also reviewing the complaint about the missing gift cards. The portal shows an admin edit that changes dates. That edit was made from your account." Colleen said, "Someone hacked my account." Ed said, "Your password is saved on the office computer. No one else uses it." The room went quiet. Colleen looked around. No one was making eye contact with her. She said, "This is a witch hunt." Greg said, "No, this is accountability." Ed said, "We are revoking your communications role effective immediately. We are also filing a report with the police about the missing property. If you do not return the key by tomorrow, we will change the locks and charge you for it." Colleen grabbed her clipboard and walked out. The door slammed behind her. After the meeting, Ed pulled me aside. He said, "I am sorry you had to deal with this." I said, "Is it over?" He said, "For you, yes. For her, probably not. The board is voting tonight on whether to ban her from committee roles permanently." I said, "What about the stolen cards?" He said, "We found them in her car." Security footage from the clubhouse lot shows her moving a bag from the mailbox cluster to her trunk. She is being charged with theft. I felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. I said, "She really thought she could get away with it." He said, "People like her always do, until they do not." That night I got a text from Janet. She said, "I am sorry I did not speak up sooner. I knew something was off, but I was scared of retaliation." I replied, "It is okay. You helped by stepping back." She sent a thumbs up. A few minutes later, Marcus called. He said Colleen just showed up at the tow yard and tried to get her car out. We told her it was impounded as part of the investigation. She lost it, started screaming about how we were all in on it. The cops had to escort her out. I said, "Wow." He said, yeah, she is done. The next morning, I got an official email from the HOA. It said the accusation against me had been retracted in writing, and my ledger was cleared. The board had voted to remove Colleen from all leadership roles. She was banned from using the clubhouse or accessing any HOA facilities for 1 year. The email included a written reversal from management with a real citation of the bylaws she had violated. I printed it and put it in the binder. A few days later, I ran into Greg at the Mailbox cluster. He said, the board is implementing new key controls and portal audits. No one person will have that much access again. I said, good. He said, you handled this well. A lot of people would have blown up. I said, I just followed the paper trail. He nodded and said, that is what saved you. If you had fought her with emotion, she would have used it against you. You used the system. That is how you win. That weekend, my girlfriend came back to visit. We parked in guest parking without any issues. As we walked to my unit, we passed the clubhouse. The door was open and I could see a small sign on the bulletin board. It said the communications committee was looking for a new volunteer. I smiled. My girlfriend said, what is funny? I said, nothing. Just glad it is over. She said, do you think she learned anything? I said, probably not. But everyone else did. The HOA terminated the vendor relationship Colleen had abused. The security guard who had backed me up got a commendation. The tow yard refused to honor any future requests from Colleen personally. The rumor died in real time as people watched the proof. Colleen tried to appeal the board decision, but no one seconded the motion. She moved out 3 months later. The neighborhood got quieter after that. I kept the binder on my shelf. Every now and then someone would ask me about what happened. I would tell them the short version. They would nod and say something like, I always thought she was off. I would shrug and say, the system works if you work it. And that was true. Colleen had tried to use the HOA rules to destroy me, but those same rules were what brought her down. She waved her clipboard and her key ring like they made her untouchable. But in the end, all they did was prove she was the one breaking the rules. If you enjoyed watching Karen get what she deserved, hit like and subscribe for more stories where the enforcers get enforced. The funny thing is, Colleen could have gotten away with it if she had just stopped. She had stolen the gift cards, buried the evidence, and blamed me. But she could not leave it alone. She kept escalating. She kept printing notices and waving her keys and documenting everything. And every time she did, she gave me another piece of proof. When she tried to confiscate my evidence binder in the clubhouse parking lot, someone took a photo of her doing it. That photo ended up in the board report. She became her own worst enemy. The HOA implemented a new complaint process after Colleen left. All accusations now require evidence submission within 24 hours. No more backdating. No more selective enforcement. The board hired an outside auditor to review the portal and flag any admin tampering. It cost the HOA money, but it made the neighborhood safer. A few residents thanked me privately for pushing back. One guy said, "You made it okay to say no." I did not think of it that way at the time, but he was right. Colleen had built a culture of fear. People complied because they did not want to be the next target. When I stood up and showed it could be done, others felt like they could too. I still see people from the neighborhood sometimes. Janet waves when she sees me. The security guard nods. Ed retired last year, but before he left, he told me the board had voted to make guest parking free for everyone. No more suspensions, no more threats. He said that was because of you. I said that was because of Colleen. He laughed and said, "Fair point." My girlfriend and I got engaged a year later. We still live in Redstone Meadows. The new communications lead is a retired teacher who sends one email a week and does not carry a clipboard. The key logs are public now. Anyone can request them. The board meets every month and anyone can attend. It is boring, which is exactly what it should be. No drama, no accusations, no portable printers. Just a neighborhood where people live and follow the rules without someone screaming at them about compliance. I still have the binder. Sometimes I flip through it and remember how close it came to going the other way. If I had not taken that doorbell screenshot, if Marcus had not stalled the tow, if Diane had not pulled the key log, Colleen would have won. I would have been the guy everyone thought was a thief. My reputation would have been ruined. My girlfriend might have left. My job could have been affected. But I followed the process. I gathered the proof, and I let the system do what it was supposed to do. And in the end, the truth came out. That is the thing about HOA Karens. They think the rules protect them. They think if they wave enough paperwork and jingle enough keys, everyone will fall in line. But the rules cut both ways. If you know how to read them, if you know how to document everything, the rules become your weapon. Colleen thought she was untouchable because she controlled the portal and the keys and the complaints. But the moment I started building the binder, she was done. She just did not know it yet. The last time I saw her was moving day. She had a U-Haul in the driveway and a couple of guys loading boxes. I was walking to my car. She saw me and looked away. No clipboard, no keys, no laminated policy sheet. Just a woman who had lost. I did not say anything. I did not need to. The silence said everything. A few months after Colleen left, the HOA sent out a newsletter. It included a summary of the year, including the new policies and the leadership changes. There was a line that said, "We are committed to fair enforcement and transparency." I smiled when I read it. It sounded like corporate speak, but I knew what it really meant. It meant Colleen was gone, and the neighborhood was better for it. People still ask me sometimes what I would have done differently. I always say the same thing. Nothing. I did exactly what I needed to do. I stayed calm, I gathered proof, I used the system. If I had yelled or fought or broken any rules, Colleen would have used it against me. She wanted me to lose control. That was her strategy. Get me emotional, get me desperate, get me to do something stupid. But I did not. I stayed cold, I stayed methodical, and I won. The neighborhood is quieter now. The clubhouse is used for book clubs and birthday parties, not showdowns. The mailbox cluster is just a place to get mail, not a crime scene. The portal is boring, which is exactly what it should be. And I go to work every day, inspect buildings, and come home to a place that feels like home. No threats, no notices, no key rings jangling in my face. That is the win. Not just clearing my name, but getting my life back. Colleen tried to take that from me, and she failed. The HOA tried to railroad me, and they failed. And now they know that if they try it again, someone will fight back. That is the legacy. Not just my story, but the message it sends. You do not have to take it. You can push back. You can win. You just have to be smarter than they are, and you have to be willing to do the work. I look at the binder on my shelf sometimes and think about how close it came. If I had given up, if I had moved out, if I had just accepted the accusation, Colleen would still be there. She would still be stealing, still be framing people, still be waving her clipboard like a crown. But I did not give up. I fought, I documented, I proved the truth. And in the end, that was enough. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.